We're tackling racism in grassroots football. Former England defender and now former Southend manager Chris Powell started his career with Epsom and Ewell, who currently play in the Combined Counties League. Racism at the lower levels has taken him by surprise.
I mean, that's shocking to hear, because it's a great part of football, non-league. You know, there's a lot of good players have come from that level. Quite clearly, there are issues. And if that's the case, you know, we have to do something about that, because, you know, that shouldn't be happening in 2019. That shouldn't be happening at any level of football.
Now, as part of our Tackling Racism in Grassroots programme, we've been to see AFC Wembley, who are based in Brent. Now, one of Raheem Sterling's brothers plays for AFC Wembley, who run teams from the age of 8 up to 14. And Brent is one of the most culturally diverse boroughs in the whole of London.
The fact that there are more incidents, I think, and people being more confident in being able to report on them shows that there is an issue there. I think that's been historical and that's been around for a long time. But I think there are more incidents now because people feel more confident in being able to sort of speak about it and report on it.
We played a team, we'd finish the game, you'd go up for the handshake, and you would get this, and I'd have to demonstrate in a way. Can I shake your hand? It would be that, and then they'd go right in front of you and wipe as if they were wiping off the stench of, you know what I mean, this blackness, you know what I mean, off them, and that immediately would result in a fight or just what now? Really, the kids, they're out there having fun, and I think there has been progress made through things like Kick It Out and, you know, the fact that racism is a subject in the media. It's being brought up a lot.
The FA, I think, really need to invest quite heavily in supporting grassroots football in that sense. I don't think the process is robust enough in order to be able to report an incident, for it to be acted upon, and then there to be consequences. There has to be independent witnesses, there has to be a report made by the referee, and if none of those things happen, it's very difficult to prove a case. Unlike the professional game where you have cameras all over the place, you have obviously officials on the side, in the stands. There are numerous ways to be able to pick things up, whereas in a grassroots game it's very, very difficult. I don't know what the exact answer is, except to say that there definitely has to be more resources.
So I'm joined now by Paul Elliott and Dejan Hutton. Starting with you then, Paul, the call is for the FA to invest more money into grassroots football. Is that the answer, and is it likely to happen? Well,
I mean, if you look at the FA historically, I think over the last year, I think the FA's turnover was close to £380 million. Out of that, 128 million was reinvested back into the game. You've got the National Game Board, who are obviously one of the big parties involved. You know, they get £40 million a year. So, and in terms of the FA also contributes £250,000 per annum to Kick It Out as part of a collective investment through the stakeholders. So I think, listen, you know, we always want to put more money in. All the profits as not-for-profit organisation, all the surplus funds are reinvested into the game. But I think the broader picture as well is about, I listened to the commentary there, and it's about diversity, it's about education, it's about leadership, you know, it's about zero tolerance in sanctions, but I'm a believer in education and rehabilitation too. And I think the fact now we're in this 21st century talking so openly, so freely about it, is real progress in itself. And make no mistake, I think the FA are, you know, they are the governing body. You know, the regulatory process is far more robust. Like all the organisations, it's evolving. And I think that one of the serious outcomes that I think is important is to encourage people to report. That's why if the reporting stats are up, I actually think that's a positive thing. I mean, I can see that racism's come down, which is positive, but across the other protected characteristics, it's actually gone up. And one of the main reasons are because everybody's talking about their experience. And I think that's very, very positive indeed.
OK, Tejan, let's bring you in. Talking about the funding, you're not only the president of the club that we just saw, AFC Wembley, but also work for Kick It Out. If you were to get more investment from the FA, what would that go into in grassroots football?
I thought that change in terms of providing some sort of solution is going to come from definitely the top down, and there needs to be a lot more funding provided for the education of how to tackle this issue. As it stands, there's a huge disconnect in between local communities and governing bodies, i.e. county FAs and DFA. The reason being is because, as I said, the lack of education, but also from a reaction standpoint, the football community in its entirety is very reactive to racist abuse, and it's reactive first of all from the standpoint of from a pro-game standpoint, where a majority of the issues that we do see within the professional game happen at the grassroots sector every single week. And I thought that lack of education from the governing body standpoint doesn't address as such. So I definitely thought that from a funding standpoint, it needs to be recycled into the education, not just to the perpetrators, but also to the governing bodies.
OK, Paul, Tejan, thank you ever so much. I think Mike's now got more for us at the big screen.
Yeah, indeed. So what we're going to look at is those people on the ground that have just been spoken about there. Now over 11 million people play football at some level in England. Many of those give up their part of time at the weekend to play. Now, Manny Brown is a YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers. He set up a Sunday League team called Under the Radar FC, who upload their matches online. Having played from a young age, we asked Manny if the issue of racial discrimination has got better or if it's got worse.
I think, if anything, it's gotten worse, because the older you get, it's kind of like when you go into sixth form, the teachers lose their filter more, so you might have coaches cracking racial jokes, but because you find it a bit funny, you sort of overlook it, or other people find it a bit funny. Like, it's just sort of typical, especially around non-league football. They're just open to saying whatever a lot. I remember one time I was going up pre-season for a club, and the manager, he was giving us a talk at the end of the session, and there were flies flying around, and then like people were trying to swat them and get away, and he's like, "Oh, aren't you used to that?" So something like that. But because you think, like, do you know what I mean? No one really says anything like, "Oh, that's racist," or do you know what I mean? When I was younger, it was kind of moving to an area that's more predominantly white. Just being the only black kid in the team, and I didn't think too much of it. I just thought the area where I'm from, there's not many black people, and that's how it was. But I would find myself on the bench against people that I know I was better than, or my dad thought I was better than, and I wouldn't really argue it, but my dad saw it as a thing. And we even had one issue one time where my brother got picked for the district team, and they put his name on the list, but because our surname isn't something that's typically like a black surname or an African surname, the guy was acting like he couldn't find it on the list. So he was like scrolling through and he's like, "No, it's not here, like you must have the wrong place." And my dad was like, "No, this is his name, check it." Checked it and it was him. So just little things like that where people sort of have expectations of what you're supposed to be like, or how you're supposed to look, sound, all sorts of things that influences it.
Well, Tola Jonah is the skipper of Under the Radar. Now, he says he would not hesitate to report any racial discrimination that he saw on the pitch, and he'd do that to the manager and the FA.
It's not fair for someone to be dragged out because of the colour of their skin. So if I do see it, I take it on behalf of myself to talk to the gaffer, Marfo, to actually report it to the FA because he's the one linked with him. But yeah, especially as if it's to offend not even my race, but any other race, racism shouldn't be in football. So I think I do take it in responsibility to report it to the FA.
Well, Toby Brown, Manny's brother, also plays for Under the Radar. He's also a YouTuber with over 3 million subscribers to his channel. Now, he thinks education is key when it comes to stamping out racism at grassroots level in football.
I feel like when people are racist to you, they have the intention of either actually offending you and trying to get something out of you, get a reaction out of you, or they don't know what they're saying. So either way, giving them a reaction is either going to give them what they want, or, you know, it's not really doing anything beneficial. So when you don't react like in a way that's angry or aggressive, people kind of realise like, oh, I haven't achieved anything from doing this. But if people don't stamp it out from an early age, then you grow up with it and it's natural to you. It becomes a second nature, which isn't what you want. So educating people early on about racism and its effects and the negative impacts of it is something that should be done. It's not just one person that can do it. So everyone in all the different levels of the system needs to take the right action.
So we're hearing education loud and clear. We heard it from Toby, we've heard it from Paul as well. So Phil, I want to bring you in. Education the key then, it appears. How can Sport England help?
Well, I think we can help with our experience in other sports. I think football's got something really major going for it in that it's one of the most diverse sports already. There are very few others that can attract people from all sections of society.
Diverse at some levels?
Well, certainly in terms of the data of the people who play football, there are only a couple of other sports that can match football for the South Asian population or their black population who are playing the game. So we've got a sport that's got a lot going for it already. When it comes to attitudes, I've heard people say in this very series that these are attitudes that are prevalent in society and it's not football's fault. Now, while I think we'd all understand that, that's not an excuse for football or the sport industry generally to back away from being the leaders. I think sport has a place to show the rest of society how different ethnicities and races and backgrounds and all forms of diversity can work and, in this case, play together. Sure.
Well, Paul, you've said education a number of times already on the programme. Does the FA target youth as a way to change attitudes?
I think there's a number of interventions, Mike. I think that one of the key things is about participation, isn't it? It's about entry points for young people to be involved in the game, whether your race, your ethnicity, your background, your gender. I mean, essentially, it's football for all, you know, and I think the bigger strategic vision of the FA is to ensure that everybody that wants to play football has got an opportunity to play football in a racism-free environment.
How do they actually do that?
Well, I think a lot of it comes, you've got to look at, certainly around the grassroots, around the counties. You know, I think you look at the county infrastructure, you know, I think you look at the composition of the makeup of the counties, you know, they are getting more diverse. You know, you've got the IAGs, the Inclusion Advisory Groups that's bolted onto there to show them, you know, we are all for one, we are inclusive, you know, and it's all about reaching out for people and welcoming people and understanding this fantastic power of football. And I think it's the leadership in that model as well. And I think if you look at the top of the game, you look at the diversity in the national team and it's filtering itself way through into the organisation. OK, you want to see more leadership, greater visibility in the coaching structure, in leadership positions. But I think it's an area, if it's certainly in our Pursuit of Progress plan, which is the FA's plan, strategic plan, for the next 3 years. It's a real focus on changing cultures, inclusion, diversity programmes, you know, really capturing, you know, equality, diversity and inclusion and embedding it in the organisation's values. OK.
Rimla, in that piece we heard casual racism by coaches to players. Now, when a player isn't in a position of power, how do they deal with that sort of racism?
I think it's really difficult, isn't it, when you're facing that straight away, and it takes a certain amount of confidence to be able to say, well, actually, no, that's not right. I think we've talked a lot about education today already in this show, and I'm sure previously as well. Raheem's talked about it, and other players have talked about it at the professional level. But what do we actually mean by education? We need to support those that are the victims of racism. I don't like the term casual racism, actually. There's nothing casual about racism. So we need to do more to support individuals to be empowered to be able to challenge it in a way which is safe for them. But also in terms of education, it's about that unconscious bias side of things for those that don't intend to offend, but actually do. How can we deal with that and how can we support them to actually broaden their mindsets a little bit more and understand the world that we live in and the way that we are equal.
So how do we answer those questions? You're posing them, but how do we answer them? How do we change people?
So I think this goes to the point that Phil made just a little while ago, that it is a societal issue that is creeping into football. We're seeing an increase in all sorts of forms of discrimination, particularly around race, ethnicity and religion, and that, for me, mirrors what's happening in society. Now, that's not to say that football runs away from that. I actually think that we should be using the power of football to change people's mindsets and move society in a positive way. We've seen all sorts of sports for development programs across the world where people come together because it's the power of sport. It's the power of our athletes like Raheem who have called this out. I know Kick It Out have put a paper out there in the past, last year, I think it was, in pursuit of equality, inclusion and cohesion. Cohesion being there because we recognise that sport has a job to do in this space. So I think as football authorities, if we've got more funding to support the likes of Kick It Out, if we've got more funding to support this space of grassroots development and look at all those areas, the guys from AFC Wembley and what they talked about, then it really should be around using the power of sport to bring people together, because you can sit there and talk to people and educate them about this is wrong, but actually what you need to have is people talking to each other and understanding each other on that level. Indeed.
Well, Rimla's brought in Kick It Out, so I'm going to bring you in as well. Are you seeing incidents like the ones mentioned in that piece of players having to deal with coaches saying things that they shouldn't?
Yeah, far too often, even with players as young as 10, 12, 11 years old, where they're, because of their lack of knowledge on life experiences, they don't understand the severity of the discrimination or the offence that's being portrayed against them. And as a result, they don't say anything to either their parents or their coaches. I've seen players being racially abused by their own coaches, and I've seen players being racially abused by the opposition coaches. And far too often, because it's at the grassroots level, you don't take it as serious as such. But that's why sometimes when I see or hear reports of racial abuse being reduced or not as frequent as it used to be, and on a daily basis I'm coming across incidents like that, for me it begs the question, what's the agenda?
Indeed. And it's not just the players, because next we're going to hear from the referee who, after being allegedly racially abused, said he was emotionally destroyed.
Now in Scotland, the national team's women's head coach Shelley Kerr has been at the Show Racism the Red Card's annual creative competition event, which sees young people coming up with creative ways to promote messages of anti-racism. Now Kerr thinks there have been an improvement in behaviour at grassroots level and thinks education is vital.
Well, I definitely see it, certainly since I was a kid at grassroots football, my early introductions into football. I see a huge change and a huge shift, and that's for the benefit for everyone.
Do you think campaigns like Show Racism the Red Card are working in this country?
I do, I definitely do, and it's all about educating at an early age. The more educated our young kids are, then the more beneficial it'll be for that inclusiveness that we need in football.
Well, we can speak live now to Chris Priestley from Show Racism the Red Card. A very good evening to you, Chris. Talk us through the event and what's going on behind you, if you will.
We're here at Ashfield, a local community team in Glasgow, and we're doing one of about 30 educational events we do around Scotland based on our kind of anti-racism educational workshop. So the young people, they get an opportunity to get a basic introduction into the kind of core principles of anti-racism. They get to understand about stereotypes and how our expectations of one another might lead us to make deliberate or subconscious judgments of them. We get to talk about what racism is and inappropriate language and how things they might have thought were banter or jokes are actually very hurtful and racist. And we also get to talk about how we treat one another. So they get a bit of that and then they come, they play some football. It's all very enjoyable.
So why do you think it's important to tackle things at a grassroots level?
We find that a lot of the young people, when we meet them, have had no anti-racism education whatsoever. So 74% of young people who come on one of our courses are doing their first ever anti-racism work, yet 63% of them have experienced racism or witnessed racism in their footballing community. So it's something that has a lot of demand. Young players, when we speak to them, they really want to have the tools to challenge racism, to report racism, and thankfully we hear really good feedback from our workshops. 78% of young people say they would feel confident to safely challenge racism after working with us.
And up in Scotland, just talk us through how much of an issue is racism in grassroots football up there?
Well, we're determined to try and make sure that racism isn't a part of the grassroots game, but for as long as Scottish professional football has an issue with racism, it's going to make it very difficult for us to make a difference at grassroots level. So for as long as monkey gestures are being made to Scott Sinclair, as long as historically we've got slurs, banana throwing, and incidents such as that, chanting against the likes of Jason Scotland, it's really important that the football on the whole makes a determined effort to prioritise anti-racism work and to eliminate it throughout the game, as well as at grassroots.
Chris Priestley, thanks ever so much. We'll let you get back to the action behind you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Referee Abid Hussain says he was emotionally destroyed after becoming the victim of alleged racist abuse from a player. Now, the 39-year-old abandoned a match back in November and reported that incident to the FA.
Didn't expect him to have professional football, but he has affected me emotionally. And destroyed me and then got me thinking whether I still want to stay in the game or not.
Well, we spoke to Abid Hussain before he took charge of Carlisle City FC's game against Sandbach United on Saturday, and both teams play in the 10th tier of English football.
People say things I'm sure they would later regret, but clearly there's never an excuse for that. Yes, it's a passionate game, but we always got to have basic moral principles, and comments like what was said allegedly should never be made.
Well, Abid's appeal against allegations of racial abuse is an ongoing FA case, which means we can't tell you exactly what was allegedly said. That aside, though, Paul Elliott, is the FA doing enough to protect its officials?
I hope so. I mean, obviously, that's a very important and a very serious case and very serious allegations. And I hope, you know, we've spoken a lot about the process, the reporting process, you know, and we welcome that process. And rest assured, I'm sure that there will be a comprehensive forensic investigation into that. The game's got a duty of care to protect, you know, they're the life and soul, the referees of the game, and particularly a man that's making a positive contribution to the game. So I'd like to feel that you know, everything conceivably and possibly is being done in the FA's powers.
Well, Tejon, referees get dogs abuse every Saturday, so why is this different?
can't see any difference, if I'm honest with you. There's a major lack of protection for players at grassroots level in terms of who they can turn to with the confidence that something's going to be done about their complaints. And they have the backing of 11 other players, including the manager. And I felt to feel what a referee would feel like, because they're out there by themselves. So I can't really define the difference, if I'm honest with you.
Phil Smith, would Sport England differentiate between abuse towards a player and abuse towards a referee?
I think it's unacceptable in any circumstances. I'm a coach of football at the weekends, outside my day job, and I see the abuse that officials get. And added on top of that, if there's a racial or ethnicity aspect of it, I think that's doubly worse. I think as well as the zero tolerance policy that we've heard about already, I think it comes to the decision makers in the game. So when those cases reach the point where something has to be done, have we got the right people around the table? And I think most grassroots football is led by county football associations rather than the FA at Wembley. And it's those counties I'd be looking at. Have they got the right diverse people around the table to make good decisions?
Dr. Rimla, have they got the right diverse people around the table?
I think that's changing a lot. You know, the archetypal sort of county FA staff or council or board member is changing quite a lot. As Paul mentioned earlier on, there's a lot of work going on around inclusion advisory groups. And the purpose of that is actually to get more people from diverse backgrounds involved with the game. But I do find, you know, these kind of experiences are becoming more and more common and more disturbing. You know, for an individual, you know, whether from a black community, Asian community, female, male, whatever, for us, it's a very personal attack when you come on our identity, and it cuts that much more deeper. Because it's, you know, I'm proud of my cultural heritage, I'm proud of my religious heritage, but I'm also proud of every other aspect of my identity. And when you cut to that, the person that is actually calling you, whatever name they're calling you, knows that they're going to hurt you that much deeper. So I find it extremely disturbing, and I know that the counties will be continuing to grow with the FA's guidance in this space. They have to, because something has to change.
Phil, let's not beat around the bush here. County FAs are generally old white men in charge. Until that changes, will anything change?
Well, I think it's still possible for even old white men to make good decisions, Mike. I could say that with some personal experience. So I don't think we should be personal and beat people up for their lifetime often working in sport and in football. However, it's pretty clear to me that those without that lived experience find it more difficult to make a judgment on these cases. So there does have to be change. I think Paul would be the first to say that the counties recognise that and they want to embrace change, but achieving it, it's deeds, not words at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid point, and I think certainly within the FA, I mean, if you look at the In Pursuit of Progress plan over the next 3 years, Mike, of the duration of the plan, there's actually, they've got term limits now as part of the governance reforms, and there's over 20 council members that's come to the end of the term. That gives the FA a great opportunity, myself, the work that Rimla does, that we lobby for change. I genuinely believe there's a lot of counties doing a lot of good work. Sometimes the challenge is always the amplification of what they do. But, you know, make no mistake, you know, if you look at sort of Birmingham, London, you know, Manchester, they're doing some terrific work. The composition of their boards is reflective of society and communities, and I think that's reaching down onto the ground. So I think that, you know, remember the counties are semi-autonomous as well. You know, they're captains of their own ship essentially. But myself, you know, Rimla, you know, we lobby them, we work very hard with them. I think if you look at the council within the FA structure, I think 5 years ago we wouldn't be having these kind of conversations. I think there's a lot of good leadership. They want to make change, so it's our roles to support, to work with them, to empower them, and obviously lobby for change, which I think is, you know, it's a long haul. But if we look at where the journey was a number of years ago to where we are now, I think we can safely measure the effectiveness of the progress.
Well, we're going to help them after the break, because after the break, we're going to look at the plan going forward. We'll focus on that next. We are tackling racism in grassroots football. Now, in this, our final part, we're going to try and find some answers. We've talked a lot about the process. Here it is. If you are subjected or see an incident of discrimination at grassroots level, this is the guide to reporting it. This is from the FA. Now, speak to the referee or match officials immediately. Tell them the essentials, who said what, where on the pitch, when it was. Check again with the referee at the end of the game that he's recorded the incident, report what happened to your club, and if you wish, also the police. Now, avoid posting messages online. This can harm any investigation. The referee's report will be sent to your county FA, who can help you. They will speak to you and your club and ask if you wish to make a formal complaint, asking for evidence. Now, if found proven, it can lead to suspension, fines or life bans. Now, if you're unhappy with the result, you can appeal. Now, Ashia Hamshi is a solicitor who got involved with football after dealing with a case at grassroots level when a paralegal. From there, she's gone on to become an FA Independent Panel board member. Here's her view on the process of reporting discriminatory and racial abuse at grassroots level.
I think it works. I think there is room for progression. I think there is room for change. But I think on the whole, yes, it works. There are things that can be done to make it easier. There are things that can be done probably to make it, not make it more transparent, but make it more transparent in the eyes of other people. So I think as a whole it's transparent, but that transparency doesn't always relate through, for example, media.
Now, Football Beyond Borders is an educational charity that uses football to work with children who are passionate about sport but are disengaged in education. We asked some of the young people about their experience of discriminatory or racial abuse at a grassroots level.
Well, there was been one time I was at a game and I was walking off the pitch and I heard the coach saying, "Oh, look at that black girl," and I was like, raw, like black girl out of all words, black girl. But there was a white girl that was just like me, tall, hefty, and she was as aggressive as me, but when it was me because I'm black and I pour my emotions is a problem.
People tell me that just like they're playing football and they just get like snide comments about like monkey cheering and stuff like that.
Racism hasn't really happened with me personally, but I know it happening to other people, and other people saying you're black or you're Muslim, you're Christian, why are you doing this, cultural reasons and stuff.
So that is what is going on in the ground, or at the ground. So, Paul, the FA looking for a grassroots manager, is that a step forward?
Absolutely. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the organisation is looking to always evolve. Just like the employees, it's important that the workforce is representative of those that play the game, watch the game, participate in the game, involved in the game. So I think it's only a positive sign. I mean, you know, make no mistake, the FA are on a very interesting, good curve at the moment. You know, like all these things, there's constant challenges, but I think we're tackling, when you're dealing with problems, the most important thing for me is leadership. We've got strong leadership in the organisation. I think that's come from the boardroom, it's worked its way through the club, through the organisation, and I think you know, we've got a top coming down, bottom coming up. We've got extremely good, you know, we spoke about, you know, Greg Clark, I've got a lot of respect for him. You've got Gareth Southgate, we've got an excellent CEO, Martin Glenn. We're working across the whole divisions within the organisation. There's a focus on this agenda more than any other time that I've known. And I think that's really come from leadership and come from also as well zero tolerance. And I think the FHL, they generally want to make real change. And I feel that if you're going to do that, you've really got to, this isn't a PR exercise, you've got to embed equality, diversity and inclusion in your values. And that's where we are.
OK, Phil Smith, Sport England. Now, you're powerful here because you provide significant funding to the FA, don't you? Now, I gather there'll be a funding cut to the FA if 30% of board members are not female by 2020. Why aren't you doing the same for BAME people?
Well, there are many forms of discrimination and sport's got to be inclusive of all. And so there were some decisions to make when we created a governance code for all the individual governing bodies to meet in 2016. And a decision was taken that a women's target of 30% was required. It's had a dramatic effect on the number of women in boardrooms in sport. I've got to say, we're now over 40%. That in itself, I think, is leading to great outcomes for women's sport. Bigger crowds, professional contracts, more women playing. It's been a revelation. So maybe the next time we look at the governance code, maybe we should look at other forms of diversity and see whether that's an appropriate target.
So, Rimla, surely they've got to do it. If it's worked for women, it can work for BAMEs.
I do think that the area of BAME in sport, in life in general, actually, even if you look at the boards out in corporates, for example, I think the area of ethnicity has been overlooked. We've taken our eye off the ball, or whether that's deliberate or by accident, I can't say. Ultimately, what I look at, I looked at it at the time and I felt that there should be an equivalent. You can't choose one protected characteristic and then leave all the others out. So I was quite vocal about that at the time, as Phil knows, because I felt it was really important that we give proper respect to all of the protected characteristics. So it's a diversity target that we should be having. And that's something, I think football is working towards now. If you look at the inclusion advisory groups, as I say, that is about looking at all the protected characteristics. And I think we as people from within the game should be driving that. We should be driving that change, because ultimately that's what affects the grassroots level. That is what affects, women like myself at the lowest level in the grassroots, playing local league, whatever it is, seeing other women like me either playing at the top level or in the leadership positions. That is what is going to make people enter the game and help diversify a game. That is what's going to make sure that the decisions that we're making, the strategies that we're setting, are right to tackle this head on, because we need to get really serious about this. We are seriously concerned, and I speak to Kick It Out a lot about this, seriously concerned about incidents that potentially could happen at the grassroots level, and that's not overplaying it. We are concerned because we've seen violence. We've seen it at Peterborough and it's happening elsewhere and potentially not being reported. So from my perspective, apart from leadership and governance, which is so important at the top level, we need to see more support for campaigns like Kick It Out, and we need to take this more seriously.
Thank you all very much. It's been absolutely fascinating, wonderful. We are going to keep on with this topic on Sky Sports News. It is important to us. We are committed to it. You've asked for it. The next programme is on anti-Semitism. You've asked, we are going to deliver. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon.
What time do you...
After 38 years in charge, Gordon Taylor will step down as the PFA's chief executive, but his departure won't be immediate. Good evening, welcome along. Also tonight, more on the deal which is set to make a World Cup winner the second most expensive defender in the world.
We'll also preview Sunday's clash between Liverpool and Tottenham and its implications for the title race. Got the best of the action from the WGC match play. Plenty of British interest on the course right now. First of a double bill of Dutch darts is underway on Sky Sports main events. We'll keep you up to date with the night 8 of the Premier League out in Rotterdam. Very orange there. And in case you missed it earlier, we are rerunning our interview with one of the most colourful characters in boxing, the one and only Shannon Briggs.
First, though, to a changing of the guard at the PFA, and the end is in sight for the chief executive, Gordon Taylor, after almost 40 years at the helm. However, it's not quite as straightforward as a straight resignation. He has agreed to be part of a transition period as the organisation is reviewed from top to bottom. Taylor will leave his post following an independent review into the workings of the union. It follows a lengthy internal dispute within the organisation, with Taylor becoming embroiled in a power struggle with Chairman Ben Purkis.
You've got young lions, you've got old lions, you've got different views. I just feel, you know, that at times you need some respect for the history and know what you've achieved. But as I said before, that's not thinking, you know, you have to keep at the cutting edge, you have to think about the future, and you have to welcome debate so long as it's healthy. And it's even more pleasing to be able to come together in a dispute and have a strategy for the future. And above all, it's about the organisation. There's no point in me, having given the majority of my life, I've got to look after the organisation and to leave it strong and able to compete in the future like we've competed in the past. And that's the whole raison d'etre of why we today have been looking to come together with this plan and strategy for the future.
Well, it looks like being a long goodbye for Gordon Taylor, and I think many in the football world wouldn't begrudge him that. There's plenty of clubs, players and people who have been helped over the past 41 years of his service through the union, and also his 38, of course, of heading up the PFA as its chief executive. I think the interesting key point about this is just what affected this mood of change and his decision to go in front of his members here in Manchester this afternoon and say, enough's enough. I am having the long goodbye. I'm not going to be the chief executive of the PFA in the long term. And I think without what Ben Purkis, his chairman, had said in November, the talk of modernisation, the talk of transparency and bringing a 21st century PFA into fruition, I don't think I'd be stood here now talking about Gordon Taylor resigning as the chief executive of the PFA. I think it was that fundamental, and I think in many ways Ben Purkis has paid a big price for bringing about change, for being a catalyst, if you like, because the stipulation of what's been said here today means he won't be part of that longer-term change because he can't hold a position at the PFA for the next 5 years. In terms of how Gordon Taylor will be remembered, a tough negotiator, I think, with a very thick skin. People in the outside world might look at his salary, but he has come up for his members and he has come up trumps again for them this afternoon. A new deal with the Premier League, taking the funding from the Premier League to the PFA from £27 million per year to £60 million per year. The funds are now certainly there for the PFA to have its teeth back again and provide a real voice for the players as the players' union. I think there will now be questions about how long the process will take, how much longer Gordon Taylor will be the chief executive of the organisation, and just who comes next to fill some rather large shoes.
OK, so as James Cooper alluded to there has been scrutiny of Taylor's status as Britain's highest paid union boss. He earned almost £20 million over the past 12 years. Taylor today has been defending his time in charge.
Personal stuff goes with the job. The only thing is when it starts to affect, you know, because you have a family and people like that, and when, you know, when the media are outside your home or outside your office. The only thing that will hurt me is when people say untruths. And if somebody say, well, I've rang the PFA or I've rang Gordon Taylor, he never got back to me, I can guarantee there's nobody who's ever rang me and not got a response. If people want to use my salary, that's fine, but I can just reassure everybody I don't write out my own salary. That's judged according to my ability, the same as a footballer.
So, a change is in the air at the PFA. Taylor will leave the organisation, having been appointed its chief executive back in 1981. In addition to his role at the PFA, he was also the president of FIFA Pro from 1994 through to 2005. He was awarded an OBE for services to sport. The highest salary he received in any single year was £3.3 million in 2014. He is now due to step down in 2020.
The building up of the organisation, creating employment, making sure that when the Premier League formed and trying to hold the league together as it was, there was a feeling that the Football League would fall away. I'm most proud of the fact that here in England we have the most full-time professional football clubs in the whole world. We have the highest aggregate attendances and we have the highest number of members of any in the world. I hope I'll be remembered as somebody who did the best for the PFA, built it up and made it an important factor in the game that nobody could ignore.
Now, Chairman Ben Purkis will also be standing down from his role. He told us that because of the current situation, any transition period won't be tainted by his own personal agenda.
Where we've got to today, we've got to something which isn't, I don't know, almost like Brexit falling off a cliff. It's, in a sense, you know, there is a plan, there is a strategy, there is a transition. We'll empower Sport Resolutions to provide that independent advice to really solidify that platform that we can build on in the future.
Is there a sense of regret that you may have brought about change, but you won't be part of that change long term?
No, not really. I think, from my point of view, it was always about doing my job as chairman. And when I took on the role, I said that I would do everything that I could to represent the members in every single way. And if that's the challenge, then I think that's my job. It was never about me trying to put myself in a position for something. And I think it's quite important that actually people have faith in somebody who will hopefully be there to implement some of the recommendations of the review, that actually I won't be doing that for myself. There'll be no self-interest, no personal gain in that. It will be all about the best interest of the members. What's the best thing for the members in the future?
Taylor, and the changes at the PFA will be one of the topics on the debate tonight. Former Scotland manager Gordon Strachan and former England manager Sam Allardyce are both in the studio from 10 p.m. on Sky Sports Premier League.
Now, already we've seen this week England's black internationals racially abused in Montenegro, but the problem of discrimination is not just at the top of the game, and it certainly isn't confined to abroad. Figures obtained by Sky Sports News show a decrease in racist incidents reported to the FA at grassroots level, but cases of religious discrimination are up by a staggering percentage.
I've been called the P word numerous times.
Black heckler.
They called us the P word and they told us to go back to the chicken shop.
Up and down the country, grassroots footballers like Zishan claim they've been racially abused.
For FC Peterborough, we'd get plane crash noises, so like, 9/11 and stuff. Shave your beard. Shave your beards was quite common. I was born and raised in England, British passport, went to an English school, live in a predominantly white area. Like, I've always grown up with white people. For someone, to say, oh, you shouldn't be playing this sport because of my skin colour, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
For Zishan's team, FC Peterborough, today's match day. This is a side that claims to have had numerous racist incidents in recent years. Last season, Zishan claims he was headbutted on the pitch and then racially abused after the game.
Now make it easy for him. Quick.
And at this club, youngsters too have been affected. Arkham Ali is captain of the under-12s.
Most of the players are calling us the P word. They're telling us to go back to places that we live in, basically. So like the chicken shop on the high street. It doesn't feel nice. It kind of makes you upset in a way, because it's like saying that you're someone that's messed up, or you shouldn't be there because you're messed up.
Figures obtained by Sky Sports News show that racist incidents reported to the FA at grassroots level have dropped by an estimated 25% in the last 4 years. But cases of religious discrimination are up around 1,672%, from a minimum of 18 in the 2013-14 season to 319 last season. And cases of discrimination on the basis of nationality are up an estimated 184%. I've spoken to a number of grassroots clubs across Britain, and many say that they are still experiencing regular racial abuse. Some don't seem to have a lot of confidence in the complaints procedure, and one club's even filming its matches now to try and get evidence and proof should they need it. What do you say to people who say the complaints procedure at the moment, it doesn't work?
What I say to is we've got it will evolve. It evolved from where it was 5 years ago to where it is now. It's progressed further. What I say to those people and to those clubs and to my own staff is to comment, to feedback. We need the feedback and the information to be able to make changes and adaptations as we go. The current system I believe, is a lot better. It's a lot clearer. It's a lot transparent.
When you sometimes feel the figures are up, I see at times it can be interpreted as very positively, because that means the system is far more robust. People are actually having the confidence to put the reports in, to say, I have to report it, I have to report it, and obviously you rely on the governing body.
In local communities, action is being taken to make change. Here in Brixton in South London, they're trying to encourage more diversity when it comes to coaching.
Unfortunately, there were archaic individuals in colonial structures that don't want black people around. Racism is in a different level than it was 20 years ago. It's much more overt and it's less transparent. Our responsibility is to create an opportunity for them not to say the racism that we face in a 20-year period, which is the worst racism you could ever experience. And it's affected us psychologically at the moment as well.
Go and play! Go!
In recent years, there has no doubt been a boom in cases of discrimination in grassroots football. The question now is how to tackle the issue altogether. Rebecca Williams, Sky Sports.
Yeah, well, we mentioned figures that show a decrease in racist incidents reported to the FA, but does that actually mean racist incidents have gone down in reality?
Even with players as young as 10, 12, 11 years old, where because of their lack of knowledge on life experiences, they don't understand the severity of the discrimination or the offence that's being portrayed against them. And as a result, they don't say anything to either their parents or their coaches. I've seen players being racially abused by their own coaches, and I've seen players being racially abused by the opposition coaches. And far too often, because it's at the grassroots level, you don't take it as serious as such. But that's why sometimes when I see or hear reports of racial abuse being reduced or not as frequent as it used to be, and on a daily basis I'm coming across incidents like that, for me it begs the question, what's the agenda?
Well, discrimination can take many forms, with race, nationality and religion often entwined. Now, diversity consultant Dr. Rimla Akhtar joined us earlier and revealed to us why she would never go to a game on her own.
As a Muslim woman, it's something that affects me on a day-to-day basis, in terms of just my travel, being aware of my safety, and then obviously going to stadiums. So I'm a football fan as well. I go to games, and, I would never go to a football game on my own, for example. I would always go with someone because I wouldn't be comfortable in that environment being a visibly Muslim woman. Sometimes Islamophobic hatred can be hidden within racism as well, so they might use the P word, but actually what they mean to say is that you're a Muslim so-and-so. So it's really important for us to identify these things. It's clear that more and more Muslims, Jewish people, are not feeling safe within football, and it's really important that football as a whole tackles that.